Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning, and welcome to part 3 of our in-depth estate planning series, Creating the Digital Estate Plan. I am Andrea Thermos, an estate and trust senior manager with Boulay. Before we begin, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items. First, you'll notice a link to our interactive guide, Creating the Digital Estate Plan, in the chat box. If you haven't already downloaded or printed that out, please do so now so you can reference it and/or fill it out during today's presentation. Please also note the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask questions using that box throughout the webinar, and I'll do my best to answer all your questions. If I can't get to a question while I'm presenting, I will be sure to answer it at the end. Lastly, this webinar will be recorded, and a link to watch the recording will be sent to you in a follow-up email. So let's get started. If we were in person, I would ask you to show a raise of hand, just raise your hands to these questions. So just contemplate them. How many of you use online banking? How about online bill pay? Do you have any social media accounts? Do you receive paper copies of your bills, investment accounts, bank statement? Or is everything accessible only online? Technology has changed the way we interact with people and transact business, and this global pandemic has hugely increased our reliance on technology. As adults, as citizens, we accumulate valuable and significant electronic data in our smartphones, on our computers, and in the cloud. Today, I'm going to discuss with you some internet statistics, showing you a glimpse in today's world and what that looks like. We're going to talk about why these statistics matter and how it will affect your estate plan. I'm going to give you some history about the law surrounding digital assets and what your will can do to how you can do your estate planning with your attorney through your will and how that will work. And then lastly, we're going to talk about things you can put in place to help your survivors know what to do with your digital assets and where to find that information. So I'm of an age that I can remember a time before digital technology, digital assets. You know, I didn't have a smartphone growing up. I didn't have a computer growing up. So just consider the world that we had years ago and what it looks like today. So let's consider some internet statistics. As of January 2021, the world's population is 7.83 billion. Of that 7.83 billion, there are 5.22 billion unique mobile phone users, which is up from 2% over last year. There are 4.66 billion internet users, which is interesting to me. It's up 7.3% from January of 2020. And I think part of that has to do with the pandemic. So that when I was looking at that figure, I thought about, you know, how long have we been using electronic, data, and how long has the internet kind of been mainstream? So I went online and I looked back, and so keep that number in mind, that 4.66 billion number. In 1995, only 0.4% of the world's population was online and using the internet. That's 16 million users versus 4.66 billion users. So just that 25-year spans really shows us how much technology is in the forefront of our lives. And lastly, on the January 21 statistics, there are 4.2 billion active social media account users around the world, which is up 13% from January of last year. Again, I attribute that to the pandemic and people's reliance on the internet. So lastly, on internet statistics, think about a minute of time and just contemplate in that minute, 15.2 million texts are sent. Zoom hosts 208,000 people in meetings. 150,000 messages are sent through Facebook. There are 3.8 million Google search queries. Those things happen in each and every minute. It's just astounding to me. And there's, the statistics go on and on. I have information, LinkedIn, 69,000 people apply for jobs every minute on LinkedIn. 550 meals are ordered through DoorDash every minute. Consumers spend $1 million online every minute. And then lastly, if you're familiar with Venmo, about $240,000 worth of payments are sent every minute through Venmo. So you're wondering probably, why do these statistics matter? What effect does that have on me? So in today's world, we have almost instant access to all of our financial information. Our files are stored in the cloud. We can purchase things instantly with almost instant delivery. And social media plays a huge role in passing along the information about important events in our lives. Think about all the people that you know in the past year, especially that they've been engaged. There were graduations, people got married, people had babies, and unfortunately, loved ones have passed away. The social media aspect, we use it as a means to reach those close to us and not so close to us. One article describes social media as the town square of the 21st century. Think about it. Where would, if this pandemic had been going on in a non-social media world, how isolated would we have each been? Think about how many Zoom calls or Teams calls or online calls or FaceTime that you had during 2020 and continue to have in 2021. So relating this to digital assets, if you Google the phrase digital access to accounts and social media after someone dies, you get 717 million results. Those results include links to instructions on how to close social media accounts after someone has passed, advice about including your digital assets in your will, and related searches for accessing online accounts after someone has passed. So now is the time to incorporate some of that stuff into your digital legacy and advise your survivors on how you want that handled. Again, I'm going to do a past look. Traditionally, I do estates, and traditionally, when a person would pass away, we would ask the personal representative to, go through their records in their home, go through their file cabinet, watch their mail, pay attention to what kinds of bills were coming in, what kinds of financial statements were coming in. All of that, we relied heavily on what mail was coming into the deceased's home. In today's world, it's a very, very different look. In most instances, when I work on an estate, their documents are not delivered by the mail. They have almost exclusively, in many cases, set up for online bill pay, online financial statements. Things get delivered to their email accounts, and very rarely do we have people who are still getting paper documents. So with the social media stuff, I have noted on the slide here, legacy contact. So while I'm going to advise you about how to establish a digital estate plan, be aware that social media accounts in particular have their own guidelines. I'm just going to talk briefly about Facebook, for instance. So I actually printed what they have on in their settings. You can set up a legacy contact for Facebook. It's a page. This page that I'm holding up is full of information about creating a legacy contact, what their rules are, how you can manage, what you can and can't do once you have a legacy contact established on Facebook, and a legal document created by your attorney directing your digital assets is not governed by what Facebook has on their own site. So you have to be really mindful of not only appointing somebody, but also doing some of the behind the scenes legwork. So how do the laws, so the statistics matter, and this, I pointed out why they matter. So how do you go about helping your survivors? Make a list of all your digital assets, how to access them, and where the backups can be found. So in the digital asset guide that we shared with you on page 3, and the numbers in the gray box at the bottom, so they're sometimes hard to see. So on page 3, it talks about your digital assets. And the very first thing is a password manager. So part of your list can be, what service are you using for that password manager, and where do they access that information? If you take the time and set up this password manager, it honestly is one of the best places to house everything. So going back to making a list. So what should be included in your list? What does your plan look like? Have a plan for your online and social media accounts that allows your personal representative to manage and handle them in accordance with your wishes. If you have Google, Facebook, if you have Google, a Gmail account, you can set up a separate legacy person for that. If you Google Facebook legacy contract, it will help you find the input for your Facebook account and help you with naming that legacy person. Some social media accounts have very limited plans in place. And although Instagram is part of Facebook, their legacy contact things are very different. So someone's asking, since I'm talking about it right now, do I have a recommendation for a reliable and robust password manager app? I use LastPass. It's very robust. You can have it on your phone, and you can have it a computer version of it. So that's one of them that I would recommend. Another one is, and I'm not going to remember because I use LastPass, so that's the one that's in my head. I will mention it later on. I know that I have another one that will be there. So once you have your list, the next thing you want to do is decide what you want. What do you want done? So what do you want done with these assets? And when I ask that, it's, you know, it's kind of attuned to planning your funeral. You should plan for your digital accounts. What information do you want your family or your personal representative or your digital executor to have access to? Do you want them to have access to your email accounts? Do you want them to have access to your bank or financial information? How about your retirement accounts? Importantly, as silly as it seems that I keep bringing up social media, it's a huge thing that you have a legacy plan in place for those social media accounts. Without those plans, you could be subject to somebody just notifying Facebook, hey, this person has passed away, and Facebook will turn off their account and you no longer have access to it. And the access is hugely important. It sometimes is the only place that people have photos stored or media access. The other thing about digital assets, I haven't talked very much about your smartphone. I know on my smartphone, it's set up, I have a new enough phone that it is set up that I can access it with my fingerprints. It does a facial recognition, and it has a password. Well, if my husband doesn't know where my password is, he legally does not have the right to that information or to access that information unless I have spelled it out specifically that he does have that right. So keep that in mind. Many of us with smartphones now have them so that they lock, and that information is not accessible unless there's express written permission. So back to deciding what to be done. The question was asked about the digital assets, and LastPass was the one I mentioned. The other one is Dashlane, is the other company that has a significant presence and should be robust enough to handle people's information. So the last thing on this list is naming your digital executor. So what does that mean? So your digital executor is the person who, it could be your personal representative of your estate. They are the person who you are entrusting all of the access to your digital information. And it's really, it's a really important piece that you need to have that named separately. Your will or your trust documents, by having people named as your personal representative, for instance, your will names your personal representative. Unless you specifically give them digital access rights, they don't automatically get it by being your personal representative. So addressing this with your attorney is hugely important. So someone's asking the question, wouldn't you want to have one person for all your digital information along with your other affairs? Potentially. I know that for me, it would be my husband, and I would make sure that he has access to all of my digital information. He is named as the administrator of my estate, and he's the person that I obviously trust the most with that information. I can think of instances that maybe you don't want the person who's your personal representative. So if it's not a spouse, you may have somebody who's handling your financial affairs, and they're not maybe so solid on online things. They're not solid on social media things. So maybe you have a personal representative who's handling your financial affairs that's not a spouse, but you have a child who maybe wants to manage your online presence or your social media presence. So they might have access to that piece, and your financial personal representative might have access to your financial information. Another question is being asked, do you have a vendor you recommend who works behind the scenes to protect information? I don't have a specific vendor that I currently have worked with or can recommend. I know that there are businesses out there that do handle that. If something comes to mind, I can follow up with that. So in doing, I realized that I either missed a slide or missed the legal pieces. So I'm going to go back to that. So I talked about naming a digital executor, and why does that matter? So nationally, there's a law called the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, referred to as RUFDA, which is just the first letter of all of the Act's words. And something I found interesting is that as of 2020, 49 of 50 states have enacted this legislation in some form or fashion through their state statutes. Massachusetts is a holdout, and Washington, D.C. does not have any guidance for fiduciary access to digital assets. So what I learned is, digital assets, like your email and your online photo accounts, are subject to a web of federal and state laws concerning electronic communications and privacy, which in turn governs the service provider's terms of service agreement. So what that means is, even though your state law may say that you can name a digital executor, Facebook or Instagram or Snap or Twitter or LinkedIn, all those social-based media accounts all have terms of agreement, terms of user agreement, and their terms govern how this legacy piece works. So you have to do kind of the front end, you have to name somebody through your legal documents. And on the back end, you have to be responsible to go online and add that information and take care of that information for yourself. For Minnesota purposes, we are in Minnesota. Minnesota did pass their act in August of 2016. It has been in place since that time. And their provisions are pretty straightforward. It pretty much follows the national guideline of that RUFDA Act. They didn't have any addendums or changes to what was recommended. Prior to Minnesota having that act, I know that there were cases of parents trying to get access to their children's smartphones when the child died in an unexpected way. And a frustration of theirs was that they didn't legally have the right to access that information, and they were denied it. So doing this, I think, is really important. Including a digital property provision in your will is hugely important. I know in Minnesota, many attorneys who do estate planning are on board with this and are currently including it with their estate plans. So just keep it there in the forefront that you all probably have digital assets and you have things that you want specific people to have access to. So I have another question. Would it make sense that a POA, which is power of attorney, also spell out the fiduciary authority over digital assets? Is that standard in the documents now? And do I need to update older enacted power of attorneys? I So I don't practice as an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I know that more recent than not that the power of attorney form has changed. So it's always wise to update that. And I don't believe that the current form has a digital access authority, but by having a separate document that grants digital authority, you can also have it for incapacity or death. So you can cover it both ways. So I think that answers your question. So I hope that this information helps you. I hope that the guide gives you an incentive to maybe take some time and explore your social media accounts, but also your financial accounts, and figure out who you want to have access to that information. As I said, when you Google, of course, Google is our friend and our enemy. If you Google specific accounts and use those words, legacy contact, those seem to get the best hits when I was doing my research. I would highly recommend just taking some time. It's easy. I've had my Facebook account set up with the legacy contact for 3 or 4 years already, and same with my Gmail account. So those to me are hugely important. And then I do have a password manager that my husband has access to. So I only have to house them in one place. I would love to thank you all for joining me today to discuss these important items of your estate plan. This was the last webinar in this series, and if you're interested in any of the previous webinars, let us know in the feedback and we can send you those links. I want to mention some of the services that Boulay provides regarding estate planning. We can review your current estate plan documents and make recommended updates. We can assist you in setting up an estate plan, and we can also assist you in setting up your digital estate plan. Thanks again for your time, and have a wonderful day.